You know, it's crazy. There are a ton of truly depraved villains in the RE series, but I don't think any of them redeemed themselves in the end. Wesker had a lust for power until his final day. Chief Irons was rooted in corruption ever since he was a child up until the destruction of Raccoon City, and Mother Miranda, although plagued by sorrow, selfishly took Ethan's world away from him in pursuit of her own happiness. And these are just a few examples. It seemed almost every villain in the RE series never had a moment of self-reflection or a shed of remorse for the evil that they caused. That is, until RE9. It turns out the one who started it all, the infamous Oswell E. Spencer, the founder of Umbrella, the overseer of brutal human experimentation, received a redemption arc that no one ever saw coming. In this video, we'll be diving into the complete story of Oswell E. Spencer, and how he went from the ruthless mastermind of everything depraved in RE, to possibly the one responsible for saving the entire world. So, let's get right into it. To really understand how Oswell E. Spencer ended up becoming the architect behind Umbrella, we have to go all the way back to his early life. Spencer was born into the prestigious Spencer family, a lineage that had long been considered part of Europe's elite. He spent his childhood growing up inside his family's massive castle, which sat overlooking the cliffs of the British coastline. As the heir to the Spencer fortune, he received a wide-ranging education and was raised with the kinds of interests that you would expect from someone of that status. He collected art, studied classical literature, and spent time hunting across the countryside. But there were a few subjects that fascinated Spencer far more than the rest. Philosophical treatises about the future of mankind, and the increasingly controversial ideas surrounding the eugenics movement that had begun circulating throughout the early 20th century. Spencer became particularly obsessed with a rare Victorian encyclopedia known as the Natural History Conspectus. The book documented a 34-year expedition through Africa by a British explorer named Henry Travis, and its descriptions of strange plants and unknown organisms deeply captured Spencer's imagination. During Spencer's childhood, Europe would soon be consumed by the chaos of the Second World War. Very little is known about what Spencer experienced during this time, but whatever he saw clearly left an impact on him. The destruction and instability of the era helped shape his worldview, reinforcing the idea that humanity as it currently existed was deeply flawed. By the 1950s, Spencer had enrolled in university to train as a physician. It was here that he formed two extremely important friendships with fellow students Edward Ashford and a young virologist named James Marcus. These relationships would later go on to shape the future of the Resident Evil universe in ways that no one could have predicted. But the real turning point in Spencer's life happened during a solo hiking trip through Eastern Europe. While traveling through the mountains, Spencer became lost in the unfamiliar terrain. Eventually, he collapsed on a snow-covered road, nearly freezing to death. By pure chance, he was discovered by a mysterious woman named Miranda. She was both a priestess and a biologist living in a remote mountain village that worshipped something known as the Black God. Miranda took Spencer in and began mentoring him, exposing him to biological research far beyond anything he had ever seen before. Through her, Spencer learned of a strange organism known as the mold, a life form capable of mutating, assimilating, and replicating other organisms. To Spencer, this discovery was mind-blowing. For the first time, he believed that he had found a potential pathway to force humanity into a new stage of evolution. But despite the knowledge he gained from Miranda, the two ultimately had very different motivations. Miranda's research was driven by grief. She wanted to resurrect her deceased daughter. Spencer, on the other hand, had something much bigger in mind. He wanted to reshape the entire world. Because of this difference in ideology, Spencer eventually left the village. However, he and Miranda would still remain in contact, exchanging letters for years after their encounter. When Spencer returned to university, he was no longer the same person. The knowledge he had gained from Miranda had completely changed the way that he looked at humanity. He became obsessed with the idea of accelerating human evolution, believing that mankind was on a path towards self-destruction. In his mind, the only way to save the species was to force it to evolve into something stronger, something superior. The mold itself wasn't the solution he was looking for. Spencer believed it was too unpredictable, but he was convinced that somewhere out there existed the key to achieving his vision, and he believed that key would be found in the rapidly developing field of virology. With that goal in mind, Spencer began forming a private circle of like-minded scientists. Among them were Marcus, Ashford, and several influential aristocrats, including Lord Beardsley and Lord Henry. Together, this group would begin laying the ideological foundation for what would eventually become one of the most powerful and dangerous organizations the world had ever seen: Umbrella. By the beginning of 1966, Spencer found himself once again drawn back to the same book that had fascinated him for years, the Natural History Conspectus. While flipping through its pages, he remembered a particularly strange account written by the explorer Henry Travis. According to the book, there was a West African tribe known as the Nidapaya. They were described as incredibly advanced engineers, capable of constructing massive underground structures deep within the jungle. But what truly caught Spencer's attention wasn't their architecture, it was their ritual. The conspectus described a sacred flower used by the tribe, a mysterious plant said to grant immense power to anyone who could survive its poison. Most people who consumed it would die, but the rare few who survived were believed to gain extraordinary strength. At first glance, the story sounded like nothing more than exaggerated folklore. After all, Travis had been accused of sensationalizing parts of his expedition, but Spencer wasn't ready to dismiss it. And neither was James Marcus. Marcus proposed a different explanation for the legend. What if the flower didn't possess mystical powers at all? What if the plant was producing some kind of natural virus? A virus capable of altering human biology could potentially become the ultimate tool for Spencer's eugenics ambitions. It could be the very thing he had been searching for, a way to force humanity into the next stage of evolution. So the group decided to investigate. In order to confirm whether the flower truly existed, Spencer, Marcus, and Ashford organized an expedition to West Africa. Marcus would ultimately take the lead on the search, traveling alongside his protege Brandon Bailey in an effort to track down the mysterious Nidapaya tribe. After months of searching through the region, Marcus finally returned in early 1967 with something incredible. He had found it. Hidden within the ruins of an ancient Nidapaya city known as the Garden of the Sun was a strange species of flower called Sunentrep. And within that flower, Marcus had successfully isolated a powerful new virus. It was later named the progenitor virus. For Spencer, this discovery was everything he had been hoping for, but their research immediately ran into a major problem. The Swiss university where Marcus had been conducting his work began accusing him of falsifying data. Whether those accusations were true or not, the controversy caused the university to cut off government funding for his research entirely. For most scientists, that would have been the end of the project, but Spencer saw an opportunity. Using his charitable organization, the Spencer Foundation, he offered to personally fund Marcus's work. However, there was one major condition. Marcus would have to move his research to a laboratory inside the Spencer family estate, and he would have to cut off contact with scientists outside their inner circle. Marcus agreed, but even Spencer knew the foundation alone wouldn't be enough to sustain the massive research project that they were about to begin. So in March of 1967, Spencer proposed a new solution to the group. If they truly wanted to unlock the full potential of the progenitor virus, they would need far more resources than private funding could provide. They needed a corporation. Edward Ashford and James Marcus agreed to the plan, even though the other aristocrats in their circle showed little interest in the scientific side of the project. And with that decision, the groundwork was laid for something that would eventually change the world. Not long after the discovery of the progenitor virus, Spencer wrote a letter to his former mentor Miranda, informing her about the breakthrough. As a symbolic gesture, he even chose to base the company's logo on the ancient symbol used by the four houses in her village, a symbol that would soon become infamous across the entire world: the logo of Umbrella. Toward the end of 1967, Spencer took another major step toward building the empire he envisioned. Construction had just been completed on a massive mansion in the Arklay Mountains, a remote region located in the American Midwest. On the surface, the mansion appeared to be nothing more than an extravagant private residence, but that was only part of the plan. Beneath the structure, hidden deep within the limestone caverns of the mountains, Spencer intended to construct a secret underground laboratory where research on the progenitor virus could continue completely out of the public eye. But there was one major problem. The man Spencer hired to design the mansion was a world-famous New York architect named George Trevor. Trevor was known for creating surreal and elaborate structures, which was exactly why Spencer admired his work in the first place. However, once the mansion was finished, Spencer suddenly realized something terrifying. Trevor knew everything. He knew the layout of the mansion, he knew about the hidden passages, and most importantly, he knew about the underground laboratory. For Spencer, that was unacceptable. If word of the lab ever got out, it could destroy everything he had been building. So Spencer made a decision that would become one of the most disturbing moments in Umbrella's early history. He decided to eliminate Trevor. In November of 1967, Spencer invited the entire Trevor family to the mansion to celebrate its completion. George Trevor, his wife Jessica, and their 14-year-old daughter Lisa were all expected to attend, but the invitation was a lie. Spencer had no intention of celebrating anything. Instead, he planned to use the entire family as human test subjects for the progenitor virus, but because of work obligations, George Trevor was unable to arrive with his family that day. He told Jessica and Lisa he would meet them at the mansion later. When Jessica and Lisa arrived on November 10th, Spencer's employees immediately abducted them and dragged them down into the underground caverns to begin experimentation. Jessica Trevor died shortly after being infected, but Lisa didn't. Instead, her body reacted in a horrifying way. She survived the infection, mutating into something monstrous as the virus continued to alter her biology. Meanwhile, when George Trevor finally arrived at the mansion, he was imprisoned inside the very building he had designed. Trevor eventually managed to escape his confinement, but in a tragic twist of fate, he ended up falling victim to one of the mansion's own traps. The architect of the Spencer mansion died inside his own creation. Lisa Trevor, however, remained alive. She would continue to be used as a test subject for decades, and would not finally die until the events of the Raccoon City incident in 1998. But Spencer's ambitions didn't stop there. Sometime in the late 1960s, Spencer began working with another scientist who shared his extreme beliefs about human evolution, a researcher known simply as Dr. Wesker. And no, not Albert Wesker, he comes later. Together, the two began developing a disturbing new idea. Spencer believed that the power of the progenitor virus could only be entrusted to individuals who were genetically superior. But more importantly, those individuals needed to share his vision for the future of humanity. To achieve this, Umbrella began secretly abducting children from around the world, children who displayed exceptional intelligence and strong genetic traits. These children were raised under Umbrella's control and given access to the best education that money could buy. Once they reached adulthood, only the most promising candidates would be selected for infection with the virus. This highly classified program would become known as the Wesker Project. However, as Umbrella grew larger, Spencer himself became increasingly paranoid. He began to fear that the very people who helped him build the organization might one day stand in the way of his ultimate goal. Because while the others saw the progenitor virus as a powerful scientific discovery, Spencer saw something else entirely. He believed it could turn him into a god. By 1968, Umbrella Pharmaceuticals was fully operational, and Spencer had begun looking for ways to dramatically increase the organization's funding. To accomplish this, Umbrella secretly entered into an agreement with the United States military. In exchange for funding, Umbrella would develop biological weapons. This partnership led to the creation of a new research initiative known as the T-Virus Project, which focused on mutating the progenitor virus into weaponized strains that could be used on the battlefield. Each of Umbrella's founders began working on their own separate branches of the project. Marcus continued his experiments with his protege Brandon Bailey. Edward Ashford returned to Europe, where he conducted research alongside his son Alexander, and Spencer himself placed trusted executives in charge of the Arklay laboratory, while he oversaw Umbrella's growing empire from the top. But eventually, another problem emerged. The amount of progenitor samples they had recovered from Africa simply wasn't enough to support large-scale research. So Spencer made another ruthless decision. Instead of sending scientists to negotiate with the Nidapire tribe like before, Spencer hired mercenaries to forcibly drive them off their land and seize control of the Garden of the Sun for Umbrella's exclusive use. Once the region was secured, Brandon Bailey was sent there alone to cultivate the new progenitor samples, effectively isolating him from Marcus. Marcus himself was moved to a new laboratory facility located in the Arklay Mountains, not far from Spencer's mansion. Nearby, Umbrella also established the Executive Training School, which served two purposes. On the surface, it appeared to be an elite boarding school for gifted students, but behind the scenes, it functioned as another laboratory for the T-Virus project, and a recruitment center for the next generation of Umbrella scientists. By this point, Spencer's paranoia had already reached dangerous levels. The first person to fall victim to it was Edward Ashford. Ashford was killed after being exposed to a primitive strain of the T-virus during what was officially reported as a laboratory accident. In reality, it had been carefully staged. With Ashford gone, only one major rival remained within Umbrella's scientific leadership, James Marcus, and Spencer had already begun making plans to take control of Marcus's research as well. By 1977, Spencer had begun tightening his grip over Umbrella even further. That same year, the Spencer Foundation recruited an extremely promising young scientist named Albert Wesker. At just 17 years old, Wesker had already earned a doctorate in virology, making him one of the most gifted researchers of his generation. Spencer immediately recognized his potential. Wesker was sent to Umbrella's executive training school, where he quickly formed a partnership with another brilliant student named William Birkin. But their time there wasn't just about education. Spencer had a very specific plan for them. Behind the scenes, he encouraged both students to earn the trust of James Marcus, the scientist who had originally discovered the progenitor virus alongside him. Once Marcus trusted them enough, Spencer expected them to quietly steal his research, and that's exactly what happened. By the end of the school year, Spencer abruptly ordered the training school and its laboratory facilities to be shut down. Marcus was suddenly cut off from the research staff and the young test subjects he had been using in his experiments. Meanwhile, Wesker and Birkin were immediately transferred to the Arklay laboratory, where they were promoted to chief researchers. As Umbrella expanded into a massive global corporation, it eventually developed its own paramilitary force known as the Umbrella Security Service, or USS. Despite the growing power of the company, Spencer continued to see potential enemies everywhere, and once again, James Marcus became a problem. Throughout the late 1980s, Marcus continued his own independent research, believing he could use his discoveries to gain the support of Umbrella's board of directors and take control of the company himself. To Spencer, that possibility was unacceptable. So in 1988, Spencer ordered a raid on the training school facility. Umbrella Security Service operatives stormed the building, and Marcus was gunned down during the operation.
Time to die, Doctor.
I will take over your research.
With Marcus gone, Spencer's control over Umbrella was nearly absolute. That same year, he also approved a new research proposal from Wesker and Birkin involving a strange organism known as the Nemesis Alpha parasite, which had been discovered in Umbrella's No. 6 laboratory in France. As Umbrella moved into the 1990s, Spencer continued to play an active role in the company despite his advancing age and declining health. Confined to a wheelchair, he still oversaw many of Umbrella's most important projects. During this time, two of Spencer's earliest allies, Lord Beardsley and Lord Henry, both passed away. Their research divisions were eventually inherited by their daughters, Mylene and Christine, who were both considered prodigies in their own rights. But Spencer's attention soon turned towards another major scientific breakthrough. William Birkin and Christine had begun studying a newly discovered strain of virus known as the G virus, also referred to as the Golgotha virus. Intrigued by its incredible mutational potential, Spencer approved the construction of a massive underground laboratory in Raccoon City, known as NEST, to further research the project. Although Spencer recognized that the G-virus might have potential for his long-standing eugenics ambitions, the research was officially funded as another bioweapons program for the United States military. At the same time, Spencer continued pursuing his own personal vision for human evolution through another project. This time he entrusted the work to Alex Wesker, one of the surviving subjects from the Wesker project. Spencer had taken a particular interest in Alex, eventually granting her significant authority within Umbrella. To support her research, he even funded the construction of a private laboratory facility on Sonido de Tortuga Island, where she could carry out her experiments in isolation. Spencer also formed another powerful alliance with a man named Sergei Vladimir, a former Spetsnaz colonel from the Soviet Union. During the Afghan War, Vladimir had participated in a secret human cloning experiment conducted by the Soviet military. In exchange for handing over 10 of his own clones for Umbrella's research into the Emerging Tyrant project, Vladimir became one of Spencer's most trusted allies. With Vladimir's loyalty and the strength of the Umbrella Security Service behind him, Spencer had effectively secured his control over Umbrella. By this point, the corporation had grown into something far beyond a pharmaceutical company. It was now a global powerhouse conducting secret viral experiments, developing biological weapons, and manipulating world governments from the shadows. And at the center of it all was Oswell E. Spencer. By May of 1998, the empire Spencer had spent decades building was beginning to crack. Inside the ArcLight laboratory, one of Dr. Marcus's creations, a bioorganic weapon known as Queen Leech, sabotaged the facility and unleashed complete chaos. The entire staff was either killed or infected, and soon several escaped BOWs began roaming the surrounding forests. Before long, hikers in the ArcLight Mountains were being brutally attacked. Naturally, this kind of thing started attracting attention. But for Umbrella, this disaster was actually an opportunity. As part of a contingency plan known as X-Day, Albert Wesker arranged for 2 elite police units from the Raccoon City Police Department, the STARS team, to be sent to the Spencer mansion to investigate the strange murders. What they didn't know was that they were walking straight into a trap. Wesker deliberately pitted the STARS officers against the escaped BOWs, so Umbrella could gather valuable combat data on how their creations performed against trained fighters in real-world conditions. At the same time, Wesker had several other objectives. He was supposed to collect that combat data, recover any remaining research from the ArcLight lab, eliminate the STARS members who discovered the truth, and finally destroy the laboratory so Umbrella's involvements would never be exposed. Meanwhile, Spencer's trusted ally, Colonel Sergei Vladimir, was sent in personally with a separate mission to recover a powerful experimental tyrant and Umbrella's advanced supercomputer known as UMF-013. Vladimir successfully completed his objective, but Wesker had other plans. Instead of remaining loyal to Umbrella, Wesker chose to fake his own death and sell the research data to a rival organization. And to make matters worse for Spencer, several STARS members actually managed to escape the mansion alive, determined to launch a full investigation into Umbrella. In the immediate aftermath, Umbrella attempted to cover up the disaster. One of the company's executives, Morpheus D. Duval, was publicly blamed for the containment failure. Meanwhile, Umbrella used its deep connections with Raccoon City's police, media, and local government to suppress the story. To the outside world, the so-called mansion incident appeared to be contained, but behind the scenes, the damage had already been done. A combination of Wesker's betrayal, the mansion disaster, and Spencer's refusal to grant Dr. William Birkin a place within his inner circle would soon trigger Umbrella's downward spiral. Feeling betrayed by Spencer, Birkin made a decision that would change everything. In an attempt to sabotage Umbrella's operations, Birkin secretly released the T-virus into Raccoon City while preparing to defect the United States government. His plan was to hand over the newly developed G-virus in exchange for protection and funding. When Spencer learned about Birkin's betrayal, he immediately dispatched a unit from Umbrella's security service to capture him and retrieve the virus. But the situation quickly spiraled out of control. When Birkin refused to surrender the G-virus, one of the Umbrella soldiers shot him.
Dr. Birkin, you'll come along with us quietly.
You think I didn't know you were coming? This is my life's work. I'm not handing over anything.
We have our orders, Dr. Birkin. I'll ask you one more time. Hold your fire!
The team then grabbed Birkin's suitcase containing his research and attempted to leave the facility, but Birkin wasn't dead. With his final strength, he injected himself with the G-virus, transforming into a horrific mutated creature. The monster that used to be William Birkin chased the USS soldiers through the sewers, slaughtering nearly all of them in the process. Only one operative survived the encounter, a soldier known simply as Hunk. During the chaos, several T-virus samples were accidentally dropped and shattered. The leaking virus infected the sewer rats, which quickly spread the infection into the city's water supply. Over the following week, Raccoon City descended into total collapse as thousands of infected citizens began attacking and devouring the living. By the time Spencer realized the full scale of the disaster, it was already too late. Knowing the city was beyond saving, and that Umbrella could no longer stop the government from intervening, Spencer ordered Sergei Vladimir to recover the supercomputer from the city and move it to a secure location. Then, on October 1st, 1998, Spencer received the news. The President of the United States had authorized the destruction of Raccoon City. A nuclear missile was launched, completely erasing the city from the map. At that point, Umbrella's involvement in the outbreak had become public knowledge. The United States Congress quickly moved to shut down the company's American operations and banned Umbrella from conducting business in the country, but Spencer wasn't ready to give up. In 1999, he organized a massive legal defense known as the Raccoon Trials. Using bribed witnesses, manipulated evidence, and an army of lawyers, Spencer attempted to shift the blame for the outbreak onto the United States government itself. At the same time, he quietly purchased an abandoned chemical plant in the Caucasus region of southern Russia. Beneath it, Umbrella constructed a massive underground facility that would become the company's new base of operations. For several years, Umbrella and the United States government remained locked in a legal stalemate. Neither side wanted to fully acknowledge the existence of bioorganic weapons. But that stalemate finally collapsed in early 2003. Albert Wesker, now working against Umbrella, leaked portions of the stolen UMF-013 data to the courts. The evidence was undeniable. Umbrella was found liable for the destruction caused by the Raccoon City outbreak and was officially declared bankrupt. Soon after, international arrest warrants were issued for Oswell E. Spencer by both the United States and the Russian Federation. The man who once controlled the most powerful pharmaceutical corporation in the world was now a fugitive. Spencer retreated into seclusion within his family estates, where he would spend the final years of his life hiding from the consequences of everything that he created. Even after the destruction of Raccoon City, Spencer still wasn't ready to let Umbrella die. In fact, he became completely obsessed with the idea of rebuilding it. But as the years passed, Spencer became increasingly isolated from the outside world. After the collapse of Umbrella, he rarely appeared in public, and was only ever seen by a small handful of people, his personal bodyguards and his loyal butler Patrick. At the same time, his health began to rapidly decline. Confined to a wheelchair and growing more paranoid by the day, Spencer became increasingly erratic. But even as his body failed him, his ambitions remained exactly the same. He still believed that he was destined to shape the future of humanity, and if he was going to see that future, he needed more time. So Spencer turned to someone he believed could help him achieve it. Alex Wesker. Spencer ordered Alex to begin researching a new type of mutagenic virus, one that could potentially restore his youth and extend his life long enough for him to rebuild Umbrella and complete his grand vision. To make sure the project succeeded, Spencer gave Alex everything she needed: funding, advanced equipment, research materials, and hundreds of human test subjects. He also granted her full control over the research facility on Sanido de Tortuga Island, allowing her to carry out the experiments in total secrecy. But Spencer made one critical mistake. Alex Wesker had absolutely no loyalty to him. In reality, she had her own plans. Eventually, Alex abandoned Spencer's project altogether. She disappeared from the island, taking her research results, her loyal subordinates, and the remaining test subjects with her. Her new destination was a remote location in the Baltic Sea known as Scene Island. And with that betrayal, Spencer was left again alone, older, sicker, and running out of time. By 2006, Oswell E. Spencer was nearing the end of his life. The once powerful founder of Umbrella had become a frail old man. His health had deteriorated to a point where he could barely eat solid food, and most of his days were spent sitting alone inside his study at the Spencer estate. But even with death looming over him, Spencer still refused to give up on his dream. In one final attempt to prolong his life, he ordered his loyal butler Patrick to assist him in developing a new virus that could potentially restore his failing body. Beneath the estate, several human test subjects were used in desperate experiments meant to create a strain capable of healing him, but every attempt ended up the same way: failure. The subjects either died or mutated into something far worse. Eventually, Spencer was forced to confront the truth he had spent his entire life trying to outrun. He was dying, and he would never live long enough to see the world that he envisioned. So Spencer made one last decision. If he couldn't become the god of the new world himself, then someone else would have to carry out his plan. He instructed Patrick to secretly leak information about his location to Albert Wesker through one of Wesker's known associates. Once the message was sent, Spencer dismissed Patrick from his service. From that point forward, he remained alone inside the estate with only his bodyguards, waiting. In August of 2006, Wesker finally arrived. He stormed the castle and slaughtered Spencer's guards with ease before making his way into Spencer's private office. There, the two men finally came face to face. During their conversation, Spencer revealed the truth behind the Wesker project. He explained that the program had been designed to create a new generation of superior humans, individuals worthy of inheriting the future of the world. He also revealed something else. He told Wesker that he had been infected with a strain of the progenitor virus, and claimed that he was the only surviving subject of the Wesker project. But this wasn't entirely true. In reality, Spencer was likely hiding the existence of Alex Wesker, possibly to keep Wesker focused on his own destiny instead of searching for her. But none of this mattered to Wesker. By this point, he had completely surpassed the man who had once controlled him. To Wesker, Spencer was no longer a visionary. He was just a dying old man clinging to a failed dream. So Wesker decided to remove the last loose end.
The right to be a god. That right is now mine.
In a brutal final moment, he drove his hand straight through Spencer's chest, killing him instantly, and as Spencer died, Wesker delivered one final judgment. Spencer had always dreamed of becoming a god, but according to Wesker, he was never worthy of that title. It seems Spencer would die out as the rotten man that he appeared to be, killed by his own creation. But then, one video changed everything.
Shutting yourself away in a dark room like this is quite the change for you, after the life you've led.
Life takes unexpected turns, don't you think?
Looking back, do you feel that the choices you've made have contributed to your present circumstances?
Of course. What you sow, you reap.
Before Spencer's story came to an end in 2006, something unexpected happened. A journalist named Alyssa Ashcroft managed to secure an interview with the founder of Umbrella himself. Considering Spencer's extreme secrecy and the fact that he had spent years hiding from the world after Umbrella's collapse, Alyssa was shocked that he actually agreed to meet with her. During their conversation, the two discussed a wide range of topics. Spencer spoke out about why he originally founded Umbrella, the development of the T-virus, the company's involvement in bioweapons and human experimentation, and even his long-standing obsession with human evolution. At one point during the interview, Spencer briefly mentioned something called Elpis. The word caught Alyssa's attention immediately, and she made sure to jot it down so she could research it later. But the strangest moment of the entire interview came near the end. Spencer introduced Alyssa to a young infant, a baby girl named Grace. According to Spencer, Grace was his adopted child. Naturally, Alyssa was immediately suspicious. Considering Spencer's history of human experimentation, she feared that the baby might actually be another test subject. But Spencer quickly denied that idea. He insisted that Grace was simply a normal child that he had taken in, and that she represented something very important to him: hope. In fact, Spencer even asked Alyssa if she wanted to hold the baby. At first she hesitated, unsure how to respond to the request, but eventually she accepted and admitted that Grace was absolutely adorable. Before the interview concluded, Alyssa asked Spencer if he had any final words that he wanted to leave behind. Spencer simply told her that he had already said everything he needed to say, and that he hoped his words would serve as a requiem for those who have passed. After the meeting, Alyssa saved the entire interview onto an MO disc and kept it with her at all times. But the story didn't end there. Sometime later, Spencer's butler Patrick contacted Alyssa regarding Spencer's final will and testament. According to Patrick, Spencer had been in a very unstable state during the final years of his life. His health was deteriorating and his thoughts were becoming increasingly scattered. As a result, much of the will he left behind was difficult to interpret. However, one section was perfectly clear. Spencer had specifically mentioned Alyssa. In the letter, Spencer revealed that he had chosen her to become the legal guardian of Grace after his death. He was entrusting the child's future and her safety entirely to Alyssa. After some hesitation, Alyssa ultimately accepted the responsibility. She took Grace in as her own daughter and officially adopted her, even changing Grace's last name to match her own. And as Grace grew up, Alyssa made one final decision. She never told her daughter the truth about who her original caretaker had been. The name Oswell E. Spencer was something she chose to leave in the past. Years later, that interview would become far more important than anyone realized. At some point after Alyssa raised her, Grace eventually traveled to the ARC facility, a massive research complex built near the ruins of the old Raccoon City orphanage. While she was there, Grace discovered a slot to watch the MO disc, containing the interview her mother had recorded with Oswell E. Spencer years earlier. Curious, she decided to watch it. As the recording played, Grace heard Spencer talk about his past, his ambitions, and the future he believed humanity needed to reach. The recording also contained a clue that would soon become incredibly important. During the interview, Spencer mentioned the word Elpis. Grace began piecing together what it meant, and when she eventually reached a lock system inside the ARC facility, the machine presented her with a question: what does the creator wish for? Grace thought back to the interview, to Spencer's final words, to everything he said about the future, and then she entered the answer: hope. With that single word, the system unlocked, the security protocols deactivated, and the facility released a long-hidden creation developed by Spencer himself, an advanced antiviral designed to neutralize and reverse virus-based infections. For the first time in the series, there was something capable of undoing the damage caused by the countless viruses that had plagued the world for decades. Grace immediately used Elpis to save Leon from his T-virus infection. She mentions that the antiviral Elpis was created by Spencer as an atonement for his past sins, his last hope for the world. He realized that his ambitions only influenced a power struggle between bioterrorist organizations that would use viruses as a way to achieve world dominance. That instead of the human evolution he sought to achieve, people only cared about gaining power. And for that reason, Elpis was created to undo every virus he created, and subsequent viruses to put an end to bioterrorism for good. It seemed in his old age, Spencer, after losing everything, realized the calamity he caused and how it would create chaos long after his passing. It also appears towards the end of his life he was going senile, with remnants of his past personality leaking through again during his confrontation with Wesker. It's also possible that even though Spencer truly wanted to become a god, someone who was praised, he didn't anticipate the scale of which his creations would wreak havoc across the entire world. The destruction of Raccoon City, the countless bioterrorist organizations who would be after his work, and creations of those like Albert Wesker who would turn against him in the end. Overall, Spencer can't undo his past. There was way too much evil he caused and he directly partook in to truly redeem himself, but he at least took that one step towards it, unlike every other villain in the series. His life and death are some of the most interesting pieces of lore in RE history, especially since he mostly operated from the background. He wasn't very present inside the actual games, and the fact he's responsible for this many events in the series is honestly insane. But I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you want to watch me break down whether the commander is actually the real hunk inside RE9, then you can click on it right here. But thank you for your time, and I'll see you in a new one very soon.